But there came a point where some of that excitement, and that's the only way you can describe it, the adrenaline buzz of being a party to something that is so unreal, so bizarre, and it's us, we're the people who are going to commit this. That is what came across to me loud and clear, that there was an element of this was the difference I'm talking about, this is different.
Over 2 years, Brady had gone from talk of petty crime through buying guns and ideas of armed robbery to finally planning murder. With Hindley excited by this new, different life, the terrible crimes of the Moors murderers were about to begin, and the setting would be Saddleworth Moor. Before, they had come here to take photos with Brady's camera, get drunk and plot. Now, on the 12th of July 1963, they drove 16-year-old Pauline Reade here to be killed. Exactly what happened to Pauline would remain a mystery for more than 20 years, before a 1980s police investigation extracted confessions from Hindley and Brady. Former Detective Chief Superintendent Jeff Knupfer interviewed the killer couple for that investigation. Why Pauline Reade? Why did they select Pauline Reade?
They were going out to abduct a child, and it just happened to be Pauline Reade. He was on a motorcycle behind her in the vehicle she was driving, and the idea was he would flash the headlights when a suitable victim came along. Right. And actually, Pauline Reade was the second child they came across. The first one was a next door, I think I'm right in saying next door one neighbour. Right. Now, Pauline Reade was a neighbour as well, but a little bit further away.
So Pauline would have known Myra?
Oh, absolutely.
Myra?
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, the moment she said, there was some discussion because she was on her way to a dance, Pauline, and of course, Myra said, "Well, I've lost a glove. Will you come and help me look for it?" So that was it. So they actually drove up to this spot here, just near the rocks there, right, on the horizon, and it was only at that stage, because Brady followed behind on the motorcycle, and of course, when they stopped, Hindley introduced Pauline, or introduced Brady to Pauline, and vice versa, and he took her up onto the top there. Right,
and so basically that established the pattern of the killings.
Yes, it did.
The murder of Pauline Reade on Saddleworth Moor was a first test for Hindley and Brady's killing creed, and it was a test they passed. Brady was capable of physically killing someone, and Hindley was able to make it happen, delivering a girl she knew into her lover's hands. Hindley later claimed in her unpublished autobiography that she was an unwilling accomplice. The evidence suggests otherwise.
The way Hindley says it is that he made me kill Pauline Reade. Afterwards, I was deeply upset about it. I was traumatized. I was very reluctant to stay with him, but I felt I had to because I felt my life was under threat. I'm not sure that's credible, and nor does the psychiatrist who looked at her work with me, because there's no evidence of post-traumatic stress disorder. She doesn't run to the police. She doesn't seem to have deviated from a normal day-to-day life. A normal person with normal tolerance of violence, when exposed to something like that, would probably go to pieces, and she didn't go to pieces. Their relationship endured.
After the killing of Pauline Reade, she could have gone straight to the police and said, and stopped it there and then. And okay, she would have been in deep, but not as deep as she was ultimately. She could have stopped it, and any right-minded and right-thinking person would have done. He now thought he could walk on water. He'd got Myra working for him. She was helping him abduct children. Because of her involvement, they abducted children far more easily than a strange-looking man could ever abduct children. You know, you bring your children up, particularly in that era, all those years ago, you bring your children up not to go off with strange men. You don't say anything about perfectly normal women.
Hindley was the killing partner Brady must have dreamt about. Not only willing to go along with his murderous fantasies, but with a personality ruthless enough that she would assist him again and again. Whilst the fact that she was a woman and more socially skilled than the oddball Brady meant that she would be able to abduct far more easily than he ever could have done. For Hindley and Brady, the murder of Pauline Reade had established a blueprint, because this killing couple weren't satisfied with committing just one murder. Their next victim was John Kilbride. The 12-year-old was picked up by Hindley at Ashton Market, just outside Manchester, in November 1963. 7 months later, Hindley abducted a third victim, Keith Bennett, from streets close to central Manchester. Both boys were taken to Saddleworth Moor, sexually abused, and then strangled by Brady. By June 1964, 3 bodies lay buried on the moor, and Brady and Hindley had become a well-oiled killing machine. Yet I was to learn that whilst Hindley was happy to go along with things as they were, Brady always wanted more. More victims, trophies of his crimes, even a new accomplice. I'm Mark Billingham, a crime writer on the trail of Britain's most infamous killer couple, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. By June 1964, the pair were in the middle of their killing spree, and 3 children had been the victims of highly organised murders. In fact, Hindley and Brady took such care disposing of evidence that it would be the 1980s before 2 of these murders were proved. Former detective Jeff Knupfer helped lead that 80s investigation and remembers being surprised by the remarkable attention to detail of Brady in particular.
I think he was probably 10 or 20 years ahead of his time. He was absolutely forensically aware to the nth degree. I mean, quite remarkably so. He drew up these disposal plans when they committed a murder, and he would have things on the plans such as count buttons. You know, all the clothing was burned, or all the relevant clothing was burned. Murder weapons were disposed of, either burned or destroyed in some other way. He was absolutely meticulous.
The idea of careful planning seems crucial to understanding Brady and Hindley. It was Brady's criminal plotting that excited Hindley in the first place, and once they started killing, their disposal plans helped them evade detection. What's more, I was to learn they even made careful plans about how to commemorate their murders afterwards.
Before the children were killed, they chose the burial sites. They then took photographs of the children after they'd been killed. They also took markers on the graves afterwards. And these photos she took part in. She posed on top of children's graves. So she was taking part in the planning of the murders, the execution of the murders, and their enjoyment afterwards.
One of the most shocking things about Hindley and Brady is just how much they enjoyed their crimes. However, as Hindley's prison counsellor told me, her enjoyment was quite different to Brady's. Where he revelled in sadistic murder, her satisfaction was that of a loyal accomplice.
I don't believe for 1 minute that there was any sexual satisfaction for Myra at all in the abductions and the killings. I don't believe that. And that to me came over loud and clear, that it was a need to please Ian, a need to do things for him, and by that cement the relationship even further.
Whilst Hindley was content to make Brady happy, the nature of Brady's crimes and the fact he kept killing suggested to me that Brady would always want more horrible trophies and more sadistic murders. And these two things came together with the most infamous of their killings, that of youngest victim, 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey. Leslie Ann was picked up by Hindley at a fairground on Boxing Day 1964. Unlike the previous victims, she was not taken straight to the moors, but to Hindley and Brady's new home in Hattersley, just outside Manchester. Once there, Leslie Ann was undressed, forced to pose for pornographic photos, and recorded begging for her mother on Ian Brady's reel-to-reel tape recorder. After her apparent torture, Leslie Ann was then strangled and buried the following day on Saddleworth Moor. The murder of Leslie Ann marked an increase in sexual sadism, again something that Hindley went along with willingly. Bringing her back to their home with the increased risk of detection contradicts everything I've heard about them being a meticulously planning killer couple, as did their increasing obsession with ghoulish trophies. I wondered what to make of this contradiction, so I headed to meet a serial killer expert, Dr. David Holmes. I wanted to know too how the sordid killings themselves fitted with Ian Brady's idea of the perfect crime.
I think that you were looking for absolute sense in a situation or in a person that isn't necessarily going to ultimately be totally sane. His rationale, if you like, for the committing the most heinous, and in fact, I would imagine that his perfect crime would be even more heinous and even more degrading for whoever took part in it. You've got to remember, his ideals were things like the Marquis de Sade, where the worse it was, the better it was. And the kind of Hitlerian rule of iron, where the more harsh and the more vicious something was, the better it was.
So, Brady always wanted to go further, and Hindley was able to help make this happen. First, he wasn't happy to kill alone, he needed a follower, and through some remarkable chance, the person he found was willing and able to kill with him. Next, when the pair did murder, the killing wasn't enough, he needed to record it somehow. Then he wanted to commit ever more heinous crimes, bringing Leslie Ann Downey back to their home to prolong the sadistic abuse. Incredibly, after the murder of Leslie Ann Downey, Brady attempted to up the stakes yet again. He tried to involve a new accomplice. The man he chose was David Smith, husband of Myra's sister Maureen. But I was to learn that by trying to expand the killer couple, Ian Brady would destroy it. Today, David Smith refuses to give any interviews, so I've gone for the next best thing. Neil Mackay, a man with a unique insight into David Smith and the Moors murderers. Over 3 years, Neil met Smith countless times for a television drama he was writing about Smith's relationship with Myra Hindley and Ian Brady.
I think it was deliberate on Brady's part to draw Dave Smith in. I think he witnessed Dave get angry and have a bit of a fight on one occasion, and as a result of that, I think there were things about Dave Smith that impressed him. But you've got to remember with Dave Smith that, you know, a key part of these events was that they lost a child, they lost a baby, and it was when that child was lost that Brady, I think, realised an opportunity. He saw an emotional vulnerability in Dave Smith that he could work on. He could particularly work on this notion that the universe is brutal, there is no God, you lost your child, you lost your baby, therefore believe in me. And Myra felt that she was losing Brady to Dave Smith and was profoundly jealous of that, I think.
Neil also explained how Dave Smith thought Brady's murderous cunning had been overplayed, largely by Brady himself. And the final murder revealed how disorganised this once meticulous killer had become.
Most of it, I think, Dave will bear out, and the murder of Edward Evans bears this out. It was a sort of shambles, it was accidental, and towards the end of his sort of killing, he became careless and casual, and as Dave has said, he was losing it towards the end.
The murder of Edward Evans was quite different to the previous 4, which had got ever more sadistic up to the killing of Leslie Ann Downey. Evans was a 17-year-old lad out drinking in Manchester one October evening in 1965, when he was picked up by Brady and Hindley. Somehow, the couple convinced him to come back to their house at 16 Wardlebrook Avenue. Later that evening, Hindley invited David Smith round and deliberately led him into the kitchen just as Brady was plunging an axe into Evans's head. But Smith wasn't to join the killer couple. After helping Brady and Hindley clean away the evidence, he called the police.
That is what absolutely fascinates me, in that up to that point the killings had been meticulously planned and carried out. He cleaned up after himself with almost, forensic detail that was ahead of its time, and yet, as you say,